Okay, everyone, welcome tonight to our Evening with the Experts, our August event. Tonight's topic is early intervention, what an early childhood teacher needs to know. I see a lot of familiar faces, however, I see some really new ones too, so I'm really excited that you all decided to spend your time with us on this Monday evening. I know you're all probably busy and crazy with the traffic, so I appreciate you guys carving out time to join us and our two phenomenal experts that are going to bring so much knowledge to the table. I am wearing all the hats tonight. So if you are familiar with these events, usually I have an internal ECC expert speaker. Well, I nominated myself for that. So I'm going to facilitate and guide the discussion too with our two experts. So please give me a little bit of grace as I navigate the chat and the waiting room when I let people in. If you're not familiar with these events, this is the rundown of the flow. So you're going to get a chance to let the experts introduce themselves. We're going to identify the problem, if you will, or why should you guys pay attention? Why are you here? Then we're going to turn it over to the experts and let them talk about it. We're going to get time to answer your guys' questions, whether they were pre-submitted or if anything comes up. And if anything comes up tonight, feel free to hop off of mute or drop it in the chat. If you drop it in the chat, I'll try and bring it up right then, unless I know it's something we're going to talk about. If I know that there's a slide later on that Julie is going to have pictures and examples, I'm going to put a pin in it and I'll bring it up then, I promise. So, without further ado, we're going to turn it over to our first expert, Caleb, to introduce himself.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for having me. So I am Caleb Case. I'm originally from a small town in southwest North Dakota by the name of Scranton. Um, I attended all of my schooling up in North Dakota as well. I went to UND for my bachelor's degree, and then I went to Minot State for graduate school. At Minot State, I studied school psychology, and that is how I spent the first 5 years of my career, was as a school psychologist. I'm currently the special education director in Belle Fourche. I've been in that position since 2011. And when I'm not working, I'm usually chasing at least one of our four kids around to various practices, games, or events. We also like to spend a lot of time outdoors in the Black Hills. When Rose asked me about sharing some information related to this topic, I thought I would have some useful information to pass along. My next thought is that one of my colleagues here in Belle Fourche has a wealth of knowledge on this topic, so I looped Julie in, and she was gracious enough to also share with you guys. So, like they say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So, with that, I'll let Rose continue on here.
Thank you, Caleb. And surprising enough, Caleb is not a connection through education. He is my husband's one of his best friends who they met through the gym that we owned in Spearfish. So it is like Caleb said, sometimes who you know, not what you know. We're going to toss it over to Julie. As Caleb said, he introduced us, and I have just been so thrilled with everything that she has brought to our conversation so far. So, Julie, if you'll introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hello. Thanks for having me, and it's been very nice to Rose getting to know you this way. Um, my name's Julie Erskin. I work for the Belle Fourche School District. I'm the early intervention special education teacher. So I do the preschool program with our children 3 to 5, and then we also provide some services for birth to 3 for some of our kiddos that have some more severe needs. I grew up several different states. We moved around a lot for my dad's job, but ended up in Missouri. And then when I went on to college, I actually graduated from Black Hills State University for my bachelor's and then did my master's with the University of Missouri, Columbia. Went back home for that one. And since then, oh goodness, I've been doing early childhood for a very, very long time. I've had some very wonderful experiences with Youth and Family Services in the Spearfish School District, and then ending up in Belle Fourche, working with our team there. And then outside of school, We enjoy time with my husband, and I have three grown children, so a bit different. They all grew up in Spearfish, so it's nice having them come back home for different things. And we like to camp, and I like hiking, and we have a dog that I walk a lot, and reading in my spare time. So
Thank you, Julie.
thank you, Rose.
Yeah. I am not going to spend a ton of time on myself because I think I know most everyone here. I've been at ECC for about 3 years. I've been in the education field for somewhere between 15 and 20. I have my master's degree in early childhood. I've served a variety of roles in education field, with my latest being a social emotional specialist here at ECC. And that is the role that kind of ties me closely to the work that Caleb and Julie do, in that we are kind of act as your bridge. So Carol Foster is on tonight, and we are the Region 1 social emotional specialist team. And when we get called in for challenging behaviors or a classroom, that maybe is having some non-compliance issues, we're looking at what we can do and what are some tools and resources. And sometimes that referral is working with the school district, like Caleb and Julie, and sometimes it's working with West River Mental Health. So some of you have worked with us closely in that process, but if you haven't and you're interested, feel free to reach out and I can fill you in more. I am a mom of 4 boys, fifth counting my husband Wade, which I think Caleb can attest to does count as a child. And what I like to do in my spare time is reading, cooking, and cheese. I love a good plate of cheese. So, why you guys are here tonight, or at least the hopeful reason why you guys are here, not just because your director or boss told you to sign up for more training hours, is that you're hoping to understand the early intervention process, either because you have questions on how you can support the families within your facility, or maybe you're a teacher and you want some advice on how to handle some of those conversations. And this quote I thought kind of encompasses how we want to approach tonight, and that our strength lies in our differences, not in our similarities. And where we want to view the conversation, which Julie's going to dive into a couple slides in the future, is looking at children through that strength lens, right? And as early childhood educators, we have the privilege of knowing each child's strengths, their personalities, their abilities, their cultures, their ways of experiencing the world, because a lot of times you guys get more waking hours with them than sometimes even their own families do. So that doesn't mean, though, that no two children are going to develop the same way and that your classroom is going to operate the same. You're going to have to be in tune with what every child needs to be successful, right? And that's kind of where it comes into that we're going to need additional supports. We're going to need access to different learning opportunities. And through the strengthening of the relationships, which, if you know me, that's my jam, that's how we're going to identify these needs. And it's not a definition of typical or atypical, right? It's recognizing where each child is and identifying those strengths and interests and how we can help them be successful. So again, I'm really happy that you guys all hopped on and joined us tonight. And I really hope you guys walk away with not just a refresher, right? But maybe a deeper knowledge and understanding of what your role is when we ask for help, when we ask for referrals, when that process starts. And these experts are going to walk you through it so that it's not behind closed doors, or it's not, I have no idea, now I'm just going to wait, right? You guys get to be an active process in this. And so I'm really excited for you guys get to dive deeper into that. Okay, so this infographic here, why is early intervention important? And we could have just talked at you, but as Julie had mentioned in one of our first meetings, is some people are visual learners, and this kind of throws it in your face a little more. Just if you're worried about your child's development, and this is obviously tailored to the parents, but this can be children in your care, in your facility, classroom. We don't wait and see, right? What are we going to do? We're going to have those conversations, right? We're going to hopefully have that established relationship. The first 5 years of a child's life, 90% of their brain is developed. So those neural circuits are the foundation for learning, and you guys are part of building those connections. Every serve and return interaction you have with them, every game you play with them. But that's why early intervention is so important, so that we don't miss that critical window. Some of the other things I wanted to point out on here is 1 in 6 US kids have a developmental disability. So think about even within your own program, I'm sure you can identify some. 40% of delayed talkers will go on to have persistent language problems impacting academic performance, which just means if we act early, right, hopefully we can decrease that likelihood. I'm not going to dive too much deeper here, but you guys can see the importance, right? If you didn't already know it, hopefully this just hammers it home that early intervention, we need to say something when we see something, bring it up, and look for those outside resources and support. And I have to apologize if the doorbell continues to go off. We have a CPR class here tonight, so it's probably going to be really busy if you guys can hear that background noise. Okay, point number one, why the early childhood teachers matter. And so that's most of you tonight. I do see some leadership here. I do see some public school teachers. However, what we're going to hone in here is what is your role and why do you matter in this process? And the first step in this process is observations. So you get to observe, and we just talked about you guys spend so much time with these children. You spend hours with them every day. You see them play, you see them in routines, meals, transitions, interactions. And because you see them over time, you're often the first person to pick up on patterns, right? Not just an isolated moment. And you're looking for strengths and areas where that child might need additional support. But now that you've observed it, what's your next step? It's to document it, right? Now, these steps, as I go over them, the experts are going to tell you why it's so important later that you guys do this. So you're going to document the pattern that you see, and you're going to do it objectively, which just means you're not going to infer a reason for behind a behavior, right? You're not going to say, he was frustrated because Joseph took his toy. Well, you're giving a label to his emotion, right? You're going to write it objectively, just what you see. You're going to take some anecdotal notes on it, work samples, checklists, assessments, and pooling all of that valuable information together helps us move from, I have a feeling, to here's what I'm tracking and what I'm seeing over time. Then you're going to partner. So having that conversation with families, which Caleb and Julie are going to talk about later, it's how we are going to move the needle from the separation of you seeing maybe some concerns to getting the identified supports that maybe they need. So we're going to partner and we're going to see if this is happening at home. We're going to partner with the directors and the specialists and the therapists and move through whatever resources and supports this child needs. And then the support, referrals, evaluations, and meetings. The job doesn't stop after those, right? The continued support is a lot of the time where you guys come in, right? You don't check out, right? Oh, they went in, they got their assessment and evaluation, they have an IEP, easy peasy, I'm checked out. No, this is the continued support and the embedded developmentally appropriate practice and strategies and having an active part in the success of that child's educational career. Children shouldn't have to wait for that IEP for you guys to be helping support them in the process. And that's where, when you're tracking things, you can start to pick up on what are some supports that this child is going to benefit from. And then the most important one is we do not diagnose. We are not the experts. We are not the ones that are going to say, you know what? They are showing signs of, ASD. So I think you should take them into the school district. Just that little sentence right there sets up huge problems, not only for Caleb and Julie as they navigate that conversation when they come into the school district, but you've also put now a strain on the relationship between you and the family. You have stepped out of your role, out of your expertise. So what we need to lean into is, how do you know that child? What are their strengths? And we're going to talk later about how you can bring up some concerns without diagnosing. That one is in bold, doesn't come across as well in the slideshow as I was hoping, but it's bolded. I'm letting you know, not diagnose. Okay, I told Julie and Caleb I could spend a whole 2-hour training on what good documentation looks like, but I'm going to go a little quicker through this. Anecdotal notes when you guys are just writing down what you see throughout the day. Sticky notes, typing, voice to text if you've got, your phone and you see something out on the playground. Anything that you can jot down and start tracking. Watching them when they play. What a great time to see some of those peer interactions, how they play, who they play with, work samples. This would be something great to take in when the referral process and evaluation process happens. If you have work samples to send in for Julie, Caleb, or whatever school district you're in, that is such another great asset for them. FBA, a functional behavioral assessment, which, if you're not familiar with this, there's a free tool on challengingbehavior.org, which has a free template, but we're just looking for the reason behind the behavior when we start tracking it. What is the function behind it? What is the child looking for with that behavior? Because we know every behavior is a form of communication, right? We just have to figure out what they're trying to tell us. Parent input, when you get to have those conversations, when they get to feel like an equal partner. And like I said, we're going to talk more about what that looks like. Pictures. Everybody has a smartphone now or a tablet in their classroom, right? Snap some pictures of when they're engaged in an activity, when they're playing, when they're using their fine motor skills. All of that documentation is great, but don't forget to write yourself some notes so that you know what you were capturing, right? A date, a time, maybe something that had happened right before that, just anything you would need with those pictures. And then any assessments that you guys do too. That is all great documentation to take on for any referrals and evaluations. Okay, you guys heard enough from me. Now I'm going to turn it over to Caleb to talk about what are some of the best referrals and patterns that you guys could hopefully provide the experts with.
Yeah, so what constitutes a good referral? So the referral should describe specific developmental concerns rather than using vague terminology like saying a child is behind or they're immature. So like I said, you'll want to be specific, and a lot of the things that we talk about tonight are going to be related to 5 different developmental areas, and I'll touch briefly on those areas and then give some examples of some specific concerns that could be noted in those areas. So we have communication as the first of those 5, cognitive, motor, adaptive, and then social emotional. Going back up to communication, our first one. So you could maybe share something like the child has a limited vocabulary or difficulty expressing their wants and needs, difficulty understanding directions, or maybe you notice some articulation errors. So those would be some more specific things related to communication. Cognitive, that could be related to maybe difficulty learning age-appropriate concepts, remembering routines, difficulty problem solving compared to peers, or difficulty with attending to activities. Motor, so that would include both gross motor and fine motor, but for gross motor, that'd be talking about like difficulty with running or jumping or balance or using stairs. Fine motor would be things like using utensils, drawing, and cutting. Adaptives are 4th developmental area. Those are like your daily living skills, and you could note something maybe like difficulty with dressing or toileting or eating, or safety awareness. And then social emotional. So this would be what Rose kind of touched on too, like with behavior patterns, such as a difficulty with transitions, or unusually intense or frequent emotional responses, maybe limited interactions with peers, or difficulty engaging in play with peers. Those are some specific examples of things in the social emotional area of development. So the most useful referrals, they're going to explain how the concern affects the child during everyday activities. You'll address multiple settings ideally. So does the child display the same challenges across different settings? So like home versus daycare or preschool. We often see instances where the children display certain skills inconsistently across settings. And that's just one reason why it's important to gather information from a variety of sources. It's also beneficial to include in the referral, like what supports you've already attempted and then how the child responded to those supports. So then to summarize related to the referral, we want specific things mentioned. We want to address patterns and we want to speak to the settings that the challenges occur in.
Excellent. Thank you, Caleb. And I really appreciated the specific examples. And I saw some nodding of the early childhood teachers like, yep, exactly. So giving verbiage to that. Thank you. Okay, we're going to pop over to Julie as the early intervention teacher. What are some of your biggest takeaways that you wish these providers knew, these early childhood and daycare teachers?
Well, I guess foremost, the most important, how valuable they are. As you had said, Rose, some of them are spending, the children are spending the majority of their day with them. And so they're so valuable and important in all that they are doing to support their development and their growth and their progression. And they're going to be the ones that, as you had said, see things first sometimes. And in a different environment too. Sometimes our early childhood programs are a little more structured than what might be at home. And so there again, it's another setting to see them in. And that their information is very valuable and important. And so if they're sending that on to us too, that gives us a larger picture as well, if we're looking at screening a child and trying to get some more supports in place for them. And they continue to be a part of the process through. So that's really important after we go through everything, and we'll talk more about some of those things as well. But how what they see and are doing within the classroom, how important that is too for their growth later on.
Thank you, Julie. Agreed, 100%. We're going to keep it with Julie.
Okay, talking with the families. I guess, and most of you guys probably are doing this because you are seeing families that drop off and are speaking with them about, and parents are talking with you about how their morning may have gone before they dropped off, but the importance of relationship building first. If you have the relationship with the families and the children before you have to have that difficult conversation or a conversation that brings up some things with concerns, it is so important. Families receive it much better when they have that good relationship with you and feel, that you are caring about the whole family and their child and how important that is. And that you continue to build that with them. It just makes that much better. Always with talking with families too. I know it's important, or in my experience, it's been very important when you are talking with them to always focus on their strengths first and bring those up as, and then talking about what you are observing and how or what they're seeing, asking the family too what they may be seeing at home. They are seeing some of those same things there, and how it's important to work together on that and to look at what their thoughts might be, or if they're seeing some things, what they're curious about those things as they're moving forward with their development. And if they have questions about it as well. The main thing is starting with the positive first, sharing those observations and then the concerns, and then bringing it back around to a positive end to it. Makes it easier for the family to. Sometimes it's hard for parents. Everybody as a parent wants their child to excel and succeed. And so if we are seeing something that might be a concern, it just is good to have both the strengths and what we are seeing as a possible concern or an observation too. So, And partnering together, sometimes it might be difficult if the parents are not seeing it at home because across different settings, things can be very different. We see things a lot of times, kiddos will show some skills at home that they won't show for us at school, and vice versa. Just because they are set up differently in home is sometimes is their safe place. And so sometimes they may see a lot of different things there than we would in the classroom. So.
And we're going to stick with Julie on this slide too.
For the language. And this is important. A lot of times, and it's using positive and trying to, when you have something that might be a concern or not necessarily, there's always a positive side to that. So instead of, as Rose said, it's really important not to label or set or diagnose because we can't do that. That has to be done by someone else. But instead of saying, I think he has that, that's using those observations. I've noticed that the child might, he likes to spin. Or I've noticed that when we transition from playtime to washing hands, he may struggle with that a little bit and get upset and cry. And instead of telling what you are seeing as noticing without labeling or trying to diagnose some of those things. Or he's having a hard time telling us what he wants when he wants a drink or when he's wanting to eat or if he's wanting more at the table. He's struggling to let us know that. And also instead of saying they're behind developmentally, you're just telling them the skills that they are struggling with. And in doing that, making sure too that you're also giving the parents the skills that they are doing well too. I know an example, sometimes some of our little ones are, parents will say stubborn. And way to turn that around is they're born leader. They're showing some leadership skills and some directing of things. They're self-starters and problem solvers. And so trying to use some of that language with them is a little bit more friendly than telling them what you think is wrong.
So, perfect. Thank you, Julie. Persistent. That's another good one.
Yes.
Sure.
And this kind of shows some of those examples. Instead of not won't follow directions, they're self-directed. So if it's an activity they are choosing to do, those directions are much easier for them to follow because they are self-directed. Can't make friends. They prefer to play alone or do their independent or parallel play. Struggling with transitions. They benefit from some help sometimes with those transitions. Some support is needed. And a lot of times that can be a lot of kids, not even just children who may have some developmental delays, especially if they're into an activity they were wanting to do and it's time to transition and they didn't get to the part to finish it yet. It can be very frustrating for a 2 and a 3-year-old when that happens. So giving them that support for that and not listing their deficits. This is where what they're doing wrong. Here are their strengths and how can we build on them. Even with our kiddos who may have some concerns, we take them from where they are at and we build on that and continue forward with those strengths and taking those steps. So they are obsessive. Some of our kids perseverate or like to certain objects, dinosaurs, for example, or trains. A lot of times that's what some children will choose to do all the time for extended periods of times. And that's using the words, that's what they are interested in, or their special interests. That's their favorite thing to do. Flipping it to that positive helps parents and puts it in a better light for everyone.
Thank you, Julie. I think everyone is a keynote there, even as the adult or the teacher. Sometimes we have to get reminded of looking at it through the strength. To go off of that, a lot of you are familiar with the work that Carol and I do, and so I just wanted to give an example of the strength lens and how we're looking at children through the Carey temperament scale because this is one of the assessments that we use. But as Julie had said, the stubborn, right, when we have those children, it could just be that they are off the charts on the persistence level, right? And that can be really hard as an early childhood teacher when you have to transition from something or you have to move from that preferred activity, like Julie gave the example of, but thinking about it as a strength. Okay, I know that they are going to be able to work at something for a very long time and complete it. How can I capitalize on that? That's a strength of theirs. So these were just some examples of the Carey temperament. So they might be busy, right? I'm sure we've all encountered several of those students in our classroom that just seem like they are on the move 24/7. They're high activity, right? So how do we give them that option to move their body and use it as a strength? If they're really loud, they're the child that goes into the bathroom and, squawks because they like the way it echoes and that feels good to them. They might be sensory low reactive and that feels good and they're regulating through that. So, and then if they're that shy, reserved one, they might be withdrawing and that's just how they're wired. The Carey temperament scale is that peek under the hood, as Carol always likes to say, to see how everybody, how their personality is. And so if we can look at it as this isn't a negative or a deficit, as Julie said, but this is a strength, it's a really good, insightful tool to help you frame that as you work with these young children. Okay, we're gonna pop over to Caleb.
Yeah, so for parent perspectives, I have a couple examples of things that families often communicate to us during this process, especially with the younger kids. Um, Uncertainty and kind of feeling maybe a little bit overwhelmed. For many families, preschool is their first experience with special education or disability services, and it can be a lot to take in. Um, they might feel overwhelmed not only by the evaluation and IEP process, but also like the uncertainty of what this means for their child moving forward. As educators, it's important for us to remember that this process is familiar to us, but it might be completely new or unfamiliar to the family that we're working with. And I also like to, depending on the nature and the severity of the disability, there are instances where it's pretty likely that this child will receive services like for a majority or all of their educational career. But then for others, there are a lot of examples of kids that become eligible for services and our team works with them and they end up making some nice progress and meet goals and get dismissed from services at various points during their schooling too. So that's a real possibility as well. Something else that they communicate is relief sometimes. They might say something like, well, I knew something was different, but I wasn't sure if I should be worried. They often recognize developmental differences before they know whether those differences are significant, and they appreciate staff kind of validating their observations or concerns. So what makes a conversation supportive would be what we've already touched on a little bit, like active listening, validating parent observations, and then just reiterating that we also want what's best for their child.
I love the reminder, Caleb, that just because it's fluent and like well rehearsed to us, that it's not always that way for the parents. That was something that I needed to hear in my job too. So stick with Caleb on this slide.
All right, so difficult conversations. I do have a few tips that I'll go through related to facilitating difficult conversations. But first, I just want to reiterate the importance of trust and rapport with the parents that you work with. That's something I do at our special ed teacher meetings. I encourage our teachers to focus on building strong relationships with families. Regular communication, especially when a lot of that communication is positive, can really make a big difference when more difficult conversations are needed later. We don't want families to only hear from us when there's a struggle or a problem. So these positive interactions build trust over time, and then the relationships that we build during those positive moments give us a better foundation when we have to deal with the more difficult ones. But even with those good relationships, we're going to have some difficult conversations. And so a couple different tips related to that. So we touched a little bit lead with the child's strengths. So begin with something genuine and specific about the child. Families need to know that we see the whole child and not just a developmental concern or a disability. We want to continue to be specific and objective. So describe what you actually observe rather than applying labels. Again, Rose touched on this, but don't diagnose, don't predict eligibility for services. And then, ask what the family sees at home. This turns this into a conversation and a partnership rather than the school is giving a report to the parent. So you want it to be two-way communication. And then lastly, kind of goes without saying, but it's good to remember to never make it adversarial and do what you can to remain cordial and professional, especially when parents are a little bit emotional or frustrated. That I don't think can be overstated.
Absolutely. And something to add on to that, because it can become that nature, right? Is making sure when you have that conversation, where are you at? Is this at drop off time at 7:30 a.m. and you've got 10 other parents, waiting to fill you in? Like, just being aware of your time of day, and even the communication of, is this information that this parent is going to want me saying in front of another parent or an aide? So making sure your situational awareness is there too. Okay. So we're on to the referral journey. You guys have kind of heard about your role, the importance that you guys play, bringing the family in, collaboration. Now we're at this point in our journey. It's the referral time. This slide has a ton of information on it, and I thought I would just show you kind of the process, but it doesn't always happen this way. There can be different flows, there can be different hiccups, but I wanted you guys to see. So we have maybe a concern, maybe a parent has a concern and has brought it up to you. Maybe it's a PM teacher, a high school student who has communicated to you something about maybe they're having accidents every day on the playground and this is a fully potty trained child. So whatever that concern is, now you're documenting it, right? So you've went through your documentation process of tracking and looking for patterns. You've had the conversation and hopefully you have that great relationship like Julie and Caleb said that you should. And now what? Now we're at the referral. And this is, we're going to dive into this during this section. And then coming up next are the next sections, and we're going to dive into each of those. So in the referral process, though, I'm going to pop over to Julie on who can refer. Oh, Julie, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry about that. Lots of different people can refer. Parents, as Rose had said, if they have a concern, they can make a referral directly to us. Daycare providers, early childhood, preschool teachers, doctors, the WIC nurse. A lot of times, any of our children from 0 to 3, the school district does the testing for them. And so we get the referral from the birth to 3 service coordinator as well. She receives referrals too from the same, from parents, daycare providers, teachers, and doctors, WIC, and Head Start too, will also give us referrals. And with that, you just make a call. If they're 0 to 3, it goes through birth to 3. And if it is 3 to 5, then it would go through the local school district. And so you just call them and say, we have some concerns here. What's the next step? And then we move forward going through to the next step of the screening. So, and with the screening, this can be different in any district. So depending on the district that you live in, their screening schedules may be quite different. In Belle Fourche, we have 4 community child find screenings a year. They are free to the entire community. We try to send out flyers and let providers know when those are. And with that, we also have collaborations. So at our screenings, our birth to 3 service coordinator is there, and she helps to screen any children who would come in that are 0 to 3. And then my staff and some of the Head Start staff come in and we screen using the Dial 4. And that screen covers the communication, concepts, and motor. And then we do have a social emotional component that we can add on to if there are concerns. And Head Start also helps us with some vision and screening. So we try to do it as a collaboration of several of the early childhood partners in the community. We do ours, like I said, 4 times during the school year. And that is just our district. We don't in the summertime. But birth to 3, they have year round. And so if you had a concern with a child who is under the age of 3 and it's June, please reach out to the service coordinator because that screening will still be completed. And then if an evaluation is needed, then they would move forward with that as well. But anytime you have concerns, just giving us a call so that we can start that process with the families.
Thank you, Julie. And later on in resources, we do have some phone numbers and information to share with you guys on that. So we're going to pop over to Caleb for the next point.
Yeah, so for evaluations, after reviewing the results of the screening, the decision may be made to proceed with an evaluation. So prior to that process occurring, the actual evaluation, parents would need to provide consent to all aspects of it. There are also timeline requirements for school staff to observe with the evaluation process. And then I think we can go to the next one there. Yeah, so depending on the nature of the concern and then your referral information, you will include different assessment areas and evaluation instruments in your comprehensive evaluation. So developmental delay is kind of the broad or global disability category that we'd consider for most of the kids this age that we're talking about. And that actually eligibility for that category can go from age 3 through 8 currently. So if we do an evaluation for a developmental delay, we'll touch on those 5 areas of development that I talked about earlier. So we didn't include cognitive, motor, communication, social, emotional, and then adaptive. And then the State Department of Ed has guidelines that include specific assessment areas if we're going to be considering other disability areas. So like if we're considering an autism eligibility, we would have to include different assessment tools, including an autism specific instrument, along with some other components. And then also, like if you suspect a learning disability, you're going to have to include academic or achievement testing and a more comprehensive cognitive assessment, along with some other things as well.
Okay, thank you, Caleb, for defining that a little more. I think we're popping over to Julie again for this question, for this slide.
So some questions that are asked, especially going through this process. So with our screening process, if our screening, and screenings, I guess I didn't say on the other one, they're really good for any child because it shows them where they are at and it shows their strengths and where they're at developmentally. So it's a lot of times good information for families and you guys as teachers to have as well. But if a child were to show some concerns in one of those areas, then we would talk with the family about doing some further evaluations, which Caleb touched on. And so the day of the evaluation, then when they come in, and there's depending on the age of the child. So if a child is 0 to 3, we do the evaluations in their home environment or a familiar environment because that's where they learn best. And that's where we're going to get the most valid assessment and an eye into what the child is able to do. And so our school district team will go out and do that evaluation in the home with the parent present. We have questions for the parent, and then we have activities that are standardized that we do with the children. With that, and do the children know? The little ones, when we're at home, we have a lot of manipulatives. And so play-based. Our 3 to 5 kids, some of them may know at the age of 3 to 5, they come into the school and we do the evaluation there with the parents as well. But that being said, a lot of those activities too are hands-on. And so some of them are fun and they are engaging and that type of thing. So our hope is that it is a pleasant experience and that they are enjoying what we're doing with them. A lot of times, kiddos, because they all have different temperaments when they're coming in, and some of them, especially if they're coming into the school, it's with people they don't know or have probably never met. And so for some kids, that can be a little overwhelming and stressful. And so, with that, a lot of times when we start our evaluation, we will do the part where we need to talk with the parent first, and we do it as a team approach. So as one of us is discussing with the parent some of those parent report things on the adaptive behavior or the social skills, one of the other team members will start to engage the child in play. And hopefully, as they're there for a little bit, they will warm up to us and then become engaged. Not always. And if it does happen to be a day where they are struggling or a bad day or something has happened at home or something's happened at daycare and it's not working, what we do then is we would reschedule and try another day. That might be better for them as well. We have done a 3 to 5 in a different environment if it is too much for them to try and do it at school as well. But we try to work with the family and the child to get the most accurate picture of what their skills are.
Thank you, Julie.
You bet.
Back over to Caleb.
Yeah, so related to eligibility, so how decisions are made. Typically, eligibility decisions are unanimously agreed upon by the team. There are eligibility criteria for each suspected disability category that the State Department of Ed has guidelines for. For developmental disability, so to be eligible under that category, this would be a student would have to have a developmental functioning in one level of 2 or more standard deviations below the mean, or 1.5 standard deviations below the mean in 2 or more developmental areas. Another caveat there is regardless of your evaluation results and kind of what the school team is thinking, the parents always do have the right to decline services. That's not really typical. Usually they want all the support they can get for their child. But for eligibility, there are 3 prongs of eligibility in addition to having a disability, which is the first prong, and you can reference your evaluation results for that one. You have to be able to document that it adversely affects the child's educational performance. And then also the third prong is that you have to be able to document that the child needs specially designed instruction because of it. So all 3 things must be present. Medical diagnosis and special education eligibility are not the same thing. And we'll come across that pretty often with some of the older kids too, where they might have a diagnosis of ADHD or dyslexia, and people might assume that they're going to be eligible for special ed, kind of not knowing that. We have to go through our process and confirm that all 3 of those prongs of eligibility are met. So again, the disability, the impact that it has on education, and then the need for specially designed instruction.
I think that was great clarification because I think a lot of people, like you said, Caleb, would assume that the medical diagnosis would yield that. So thank you. Okay, so you heard from the experts what's kind of happening behind the scenes, or maybe not what you guys are at the, front lines for as early childhood educators. So while you're waiting, right? So you maybe you made the referral, maybe you had the conversation with the parents and they called in. What is your guys' role? What are you guys going to do while we wait? And you get to continue to support. And what does that mean? Well, we're going to have some examples on the next slide, but it just means there are a lot of things that we know to be beneficial for all children. So if you don't have these things, we can implement them in a classroom with no negative ramifications. They are going to be good for any child. They're going to have maybe even a better effect on children that need additional supports, right? And so some of those are the use of visuals within your classroom, the use of schedules, which we're going to get to see some great examples later on from Julie in her classroom. That relationship that both Caleb and Julie have talked about, like, do you have a great relationship with the child, with the parents? How can we deepen that? Some choice and autonomy in the classroom. The power of choice is huge. Sensory. Too often, children need more sensory output and input, and so are we offering that to them? And then different ways that they can communicate to you. The next slide was actually prepared by Kayla at the last evening with the experts, so I snagged it. These are some great resources from challengingbehavior.org, and it's completely free. This is from the pyramid model, and it is, just some examples of those visuals, schedule, problem solving, emotional competence. So just a little really great slide that a lot of you are probably familiar with, but again, that's challengingbehavior.org. Go to the resource library and navigate it. Make sure you select English because there's about 10 different languages that you can get into the weeds on. So, but just wanted you guys to see that, and I did send that website out in the email resources as well. Okay, we're gonna pop back over to Julie.
Understanding the IEP or IFSP. And so an IEP is an individual education plan. After a child has gone through and we've done the evaluations and they meet eligibility, then we contact the parents and we set up a meeting to go over the evaluation results and then also to build an IEP or an IFSP with them. The IEP, like I said, was an individual education plan, and that's for our children who are 3 to 5. An IFSP is the individual family service plan. And for our kiddos who are 0 to 3, it's a family engagement model because we know that children that age learn best in their own environments and in their routines. And so with that, their plan, a lot of the goals and the objectives are built right into what they would do during their day. And so our younger ones, it encompasses and engages the whole family. And the older children, the 3 to 5s, are through the school district and is more individualized for the students' educational progress. Which is on this slide. Thank you, Rose. I forgot to tell you to turn it. So yes, birth to 3 is very much family-centered, and services are provided with the provider. We've done either with daycare providers or with a parent. We do have to have that interaction because of the engagement. And then at 3 is when they would come into the school. Depending on how they are eligible. If they are eligible for the preschool classroom, some of our children who may have only qualified for communication or language services come in for their speech and language therapy, and then they go back to their preschool or daycare or home as well. So.
Okay, we're going to stick with Julie on this slide.
Okay, acronyms. Special education has a lot of acronyms, and sometimes those can be really confusing. And so with that, the IEP, that is that individual education plan. When you see LRE, that's the least restrictive environment. And so with all of our kids, everything we have to look at. So for instance, like a school-age child, we always want to make sure their services are provided within the least restrictive environment. So if at all possible, we still want them receiving their services within the classroom or with other peers who are in their classroom, depending on what their needs are. Some of our children with more significant needs may need to have pull-out time instead of push-in. Push in would be where the therapies come into the classroom. Pull out is where we take them out either individually or in a small group. And then all the way up until some children are in a self-contained classroom. Some are provided services at home if depending on medical needs and those type of things. So always making sure that we are servicing the child in the least restrictive environment as possible. The IFSP we discussed was that individual family service plan. SDI is that specially designed instruction. And so for our kiddos who may have some delays or some other needs, we want to make sure that their instruction is specially designed for them and that they are acquiring it. So that is one of the prongs, as Caleb had said, that they have to be a child in need of that specially designed instruction to be able to receive services. OT is occupational therapy. PT would mean they are receiving physical therapy services. SLP is our speech language pathologist. And sometimes you might see it as SLT, and that would be the therapy part of it that they're receiving. But the SLP is the speech language pathologist herself. Free and appropriate public education. All children deserve that. And so you will see that a lot, the FAPE. We need to make sure that all children are receiving that education. ROI is a release of information. And as Caleb had said before, we can begin any of our evaluation. We have to have that release of information from our release for them to consent to do the evaluation. And then also to be able to give you guys results, we have to have the release of information signed. We are not able to share any information about families or children or their progress without having that release signed by the parent first. It's really important that we do not do that unless we have their approval. And then after the release is signed, then we are able to send that information to you guys. So.
Thank you, Julie, for breaking down the common acronyms. We're going to pop back over to Caleb.
Yeah, so understanding an IEP, try and touch on each of these points for you. So the present levels, that's the section of the IEP where your strengths and needs are listed. So the child's needs, goals, and services all need to tie together. You can't have a goal in an area that you don't have addressed in your present levels, or services in an area that you don't have a goal. So the IEP document and the plan has to flow, and it has to make sense. So your strengths and your needs will inform your goals that the team feels are appropriate, and then that would inform your services on how you're going to hopefully try and reach those goals. Accommodations or supports. So the accommodations section of the IEP that identifies the supports that a child needs to access, participate in, and make progress in their environment. Accommodations change how a child accesses instruction or participates in an activity. They don't change what we expect the child to learn. And then progress monitoring. So progress on the goals that we've set will be reported at specific intervals during the year. And typically that's either 3 or 4 times a year. And when the parent receives information about progress on the goals, usually it will indicate either progress is being made, insufficient progress, or maybe they've met their goal. That could be documented as well. And typically your IEP will be adjusted annually, but you can adjust your plan if necessary, like based on progress reports and how the child is doing. Placement and LRE. So LRE, like we talked about, is your least restrictive environment. There's a continuum of alternative placements from least restrictive to most, and that's based on time spent with peers and then this service setting. So like Julie touched on, it's our goal for our students to have or to be with their general education peers, or typically developing peers, as much as possible based on their unique needs. This can be challenging in preschool, as some programs only serve students that qualify with an IEP. But for the older kids, that's definitely a focus of ours, is to have them with their peers as much as possible.
Thank you, Caleb. So now each of those things that Caleb discussed, we're going to get a chance to look at an IEP. This was a sample one that was prepared by Tessa Burke. And I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint and I'm going to pull it up as a PDF. So bear with me 1 second. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna let Caleb and Julie kind of walk us through if you were handed this IEP tomorrow by a parent, what are you looking at? So they're gonna kind of walk us through.
Yeah. Do you want me to start, Julie?
If you want to, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, so this is just your first page. This is going to have all of the information about the student. So their date of birth, their guardians. You'll have your dates related to the plan and when their reevaluation would be due. We talk about typically doing a reevaluation every 3 years. So if we do an initial evaluation for a child, and then determine they're eligible, then we'd have to redetermine eligibility by 3 years from that date. Then we have our team membership, which indicates everybody that participated in the meeting. And let's see, that's services right away on this page, huh? It's a little bit small for me.
Sorry, let me see if I can. Is that better for you guys?
Yep, that's better. Yeah, so then this would be listing the services that the child receives. So for related to the younger kids and developmental delay, you might see like communication services here or speech therapy. You might see adaptive services or behavior services that would be provided in the preschool classroom, or like physical or an occupational therapy as well. And then, so it says the service type and then amount of time. That would be usually it's like, say, 20 minutes 4 times a week or something like that. In our school district, we have a 4-day school week typically, so that's how we would document that. And then placement we talked about just a little bit ago. That goes from least to most restrictive and just kind of indicates the setting that the services occur in. Consent for initial placement. So in order to provide a child with special education services, the parents have to consent to that. So this is where that would occur, and that's just for the first time they're eligible. All right, so now we're getting to the strengths and the strengths and needs, which is the present levels of performance section of the IEP. So each area that you're going to address in the IEP, you have to include in this section. So if they're going to have speech services, you'll have to include communication strengths and needs. If you're going to have cognitive services, you have to include strengths and needs in that area, like we talked about earlier. And your educational impact, that's those prongs that I was talking about. So in addition to being diagnosed or having a disability, we have to indicate how that disability affects them in the classroom or in their environment. So that's where we would state that's what the disability looks like in their educational setting and why they need services. And then we always include parent input as well. So some parents are really willing to share and have a lot of good input, and others you kind of have to prompt and give them some leads to try and get information out of them. Right. So special factors, things like is the child limited in English? Is English not their first language? Are there special communication needs, such as like a device or something that they might need to assist them with communication? Assistive technology, similar to that prior one. Braille's addressed in there. And then a pretty big one is does the student's behavior impede their learning or the learning of others. And if you put yes, you have to address it in that section and say what you're doing as far as strategies to support the child. And related to that, behavior impedes learning, and kind of not just specific to developmental delay, but there are some other disability categories for the older kids where this has to be addressed because those disabilities have behavior components. So that'd be like autism or emotional disability or like another health impairment related to ADHD. All of those disabilities would be, you'd see something marked in this behavior impedes learning section. Julie, do you want to jump in on the goals
You
there?
bet. Next
Yeah.
is the goals. And so after that, as Caleb had said, our goals follow the present levels. So where those needs are on that present level page. And we talk with the parents too about, I know with mine, before we do the IEP, I send home a form with their concerns, what they're seeing at home too, and what they would like to see as goals for us in the school district while they are at school or receiving therapies to get some of their input. And then the day of too, we discuss too, because a lot of times when we're going, it's a lot of information to go over with parents. They may have some other thoughts. So we have a draft that we can change or add in or take out. But with the goals then, those areas where there were concerns are, we pick from the goals or from the needs, what we want to work on. And so like on this example, it says John will transition between tasks with no less than 2 adult assists as observed 5 times each semester. So our goals have to have specific parts to them. They have to be able to be measured because we're going to track data on them. And in order to know that the goal has been met, we have to have those parts. So when or where. So throughout the preschool day, it could also be, I know, like while engaging in play or activities within the classroom, or when given a bin of different colored objects, they will name. So trying to explain to, so it's very clear as to what you're, when and where you're going to look at that, and then what they're going to do. And so in this one, he's going to transition between tasks. So that would be like if we're ending a center time or if we're transitioning from story time to the table, that he will do that with no more than 2 redirections from staff. So that would be like, okay, if John isn't just getting up when the transition signal has been given, a verbal or a visual. We use visuals in our classroom a lot we just show a picture. And a lot of times that's all it takes. And they'll get up and they will go. And so we would keep track if he does that with less than 2 of those reminders. And then we track how often that is happening. And that tells us then if he's meeting that goal, we're able to track it. The procedure code that is highlighted there, that's how we're going to track that data. And so that one has the 2 on it. So it's observations. And a lot of times with our early childhood children, that is because we are observing a lot of their skills while they are playing and doing and within that. Older children, sometimes you'll have some work samples or some unit tests or different things like that. But with our younger children, a lot of times it is observation or set data response. And so if you are looking at like an older preschool child and they're doing the letters or the shapes, some of that is data response. How many did they get out of that many correct? And then the procedure or the program code over to the right of that would be when we go to do their progress monitoring or to give the parents through report that is showing if the progress has been made. So there would be a P in there if it's insufficient progress, which is meaning they're not making any progress or they may have regressed. Sometimes with some of our kiddos and some of those behavioral goals, if they have had a brand new baby born into the family or some different changes within, they've been sick a lot and so they've missed a lot of school, we may see some regression on that. And so then it would be insufficient progress. Or if it's a goal, sometimes with our speech language goals, some of those are broken down. And so if they didn't focus on like articulation, a certain sound, that reporting period, then it would be not addressed. And then the M, of course, is if they met the goal. And then from that, usually if they meet a goal, then we contact parents and we set a new goal using some of those other needs that were listed in the present levels on there. But each of the areas of need to have goals on here. So you would have, if you have OT would have their goals for fine motor or sensory, and speech would have theirs, and then the academic portion too. So, and then the last, Rose, the reporting, the reporting frequency. So in our district, and this can be different in many, each district may be a little bit different in how they do that. This one, there is 2 times per year or at semester. In our district, it's trimesters, so 3 to 4 times a year. And they do a copy of the goal page. In our district, we're doing some progress reports that we send home with the parents as well. So. And this is some more, so this is some examples of some more goals. So John will parallel play with peers and use appropriate greetings and farewells as observed 5 times each semester. So it's telling you what you want to see him doing, and how often. And there again, this one has a procedure code of 9. So it's also the observation, but then there's also some data checking with that too. So,
on. Stop me, Julie, if you want me to. These are just more examples.
Yeah, and these are some more academic ones. So that was one with colors.
Okay.
That was just showing you when presented with pictures or manipulatives, he'll label 11 colors with 100% accuracy 4 out of 5 times that we tried to do it with them. And so, and then they actually listed the colors as well. So that helps the parents to see specifically what we are doing with that. So.
Another one.
Oh, this one also has some benchmarks. So some of our children who might have, so our children that might have a cognitive disability, and we can do it for any of them, but usually the kiddos that have that, we break the main goal down into steps. And so that would be those objectives. With, for instance, like with colors, they're going to match them first. And so that would be the first objective they would be able, and once they meet that, then it would, they would point to the color. And then finally, the final part or the little large goal would be to identify the colors or name them. So just breaking it down into smaller steps for them. And then this is our educational accommodations and modifications. Within our preschool classroom, in our district, our early intervention preschool, all of the children do have to qualify. So they are all on IEPs. I still will put in these accommodations and modifications for them because if they were to move to a different district, the other district knows some of those supports that we were doing with them, as well as our older preschool children who are going into kindergarten. Their kindergarten teacher then knows too some of those things that we would do. And so some of those that we put there are communication devices. Sometimes they might need some gross motor equipment to help them be successful within the classroom and meet those educational needs. Fine motor items, sometimes trying to think of some different things, grips, different things that they might need to use to also be successful in some of those learning items. Wait time. We use a lot of, so I use flexible breaks and schedules as well. Some of our kiddos who may need some of that calming down time or self-regulation time are going to need those breaks within the classroom. And so if you build those right into the day and put it as part of their accommodation, it's something that they will receive. In our classroom, we also put separate classroom because my classroom doesn't have the typically developing peers. They all have qualified for services in there too. So, And then the next page is the services page. And so this is going to tell you what services they're receiving, who's going to be providing the service, and what they are going to be getting. So on this particular one, occupational therapy, the person responsible for that therapy or for tracking the goals is the occupational therapist. And the child, John, is going to receive some OT services one time a week for 20 minutes in the special education classroom, and that's for the length of the IEP. And so that was sometimes the kids, this is where that push in or pull out. I know like in our district, our OT in our early childhood program, she comes in and provides the services within the classroom with the kiddos. And our speech language pathologist, depending on the child and their needs, individual needs, she will do some of it in the classroom, or she may pull the child out individually or with a small group of kids to do too. And so, and PT as well. Will usually pull out. Sometimes our physical therapist joins us out on the playground and we do some PT out there or some movement within the classroom as well when she's working with the child. But the frequency, the duration, are very important on here, and that tells us how much time, and we have to make sure that we are providing those services for those times. Our little children for early childhood, a lot of them will receive transportation, and that can be provided to and from home. In our district, it's if parents are working or they do not have a vehicle, or they only have one vehicle and the parent that's working is doing that, or we provide we can provide mileage in special circumstances. But if they're receiving, so we would pick up from Head Start or from daycare and bring them to school, depending on if they were morning or afternoon, and then either take them home. Some parents will bring in the morning and we drop off at daycare after class is done, or at preschool. A lot of times some children will do two different programs. So they'll do their regular early childhood program or Head Start, and us as well. And so, and this is the assessment part with our early childhood children. There are no district or state assessments that are required at that age. It starts at the age of 5. This would be for those accommodations that would be needed for some of that testing starting at 3rd grade. And then that least restrictive environment again that Caleb had talked about with the different on the right-hand side are our early childhood ones. And so that would be if they're in their early childhood program, 10 hours or more a week, and we either go into that setting to provide services, or they come to us. But there is so a kiddo who would be doing an early childhood preschool or Head Start, if they're doing that, and then they come to us for services, that would be that 315. The 325 and 330 hours if they're less than 10 hours a week, and then it moves on down. It's that least restrictive environment to separate class, separate school. It's where those services are provided. And then, these are the services again. So like for the adaptive, again, how many times a week? And for in the classroom, my children are there for 2, depending on the class, 2 hours or 2.5. But the services aren't necessarily provided the whole time. So if they're receiving some of those cognitive or pre-academic services, it may say 30 minutes, but they're still at our class for the whole time. And then, sorry, Rose. So a child that might be in Head Start on this one or another early childhood program, we also have to put where they're with other peers who are not on IEPs. And that's that justification for placement, to just make sure that we are providing services in that least restrictive environment. And then the potential negative effects would be, so like with my classroom, all of our children are on IEPs, so they're not having those children who may not have delays as role models. And then the last page is our extended school year services that usually happen in the summer. And here again, each school district is different on when and where they provide those services. In our district with our children, we track all of that progress. And so if a child regresses over breaks, so after Christmas break, if they came back and were starting at square one again, that would be a regression. So they can qualify for under regression or recoupment. Emerging skills. So sometimes a child may start progressing and becoming very successful with some of those skills, but they're not solid yet. And so we can use emerging skills. And then critical or maintenance of critical life skills are some of our students who may have a little bit more involvement and may need some of those skills through longer than just the school year so that they do not regress. They may have some mobility issues or some feeding and some adaptive things as well as the cognitive part of it. And that would be, we would fill this out for that. Our 3 to 5 year old children, when they first come into the program, we would have to check not needed and then or not needed, I'm sorry, to be determined by, and then the date, because we don't have any data coming in. Some of our children who they were in the first year and were going into that second year, we would have more data on that if their IEP worthy, and we can take care of it at the IEP meeting.
I think the last is the review.
Yep. And the last is that parental prior written notice where we just review everything we went over on the IEP and at the meeting. Did I miss anything, Caleb? Or do you have anything to add?
Yeah, just one other thing too is that depending on your district, you might have different format or software that you use for the IEP, but you'll include all of the same information because it's based on what the South Dakota Department of Ed requires. But like in Belle Fourche, we use something called Infinite Campus, and it looks a little bit different. That's why I was struggling to see what that first page had on the bottom of it, because it's not where we list that on our document. But yeah, it might look different depending on your district, but it'll contain the same information.
Thank you, Caleb, for just like they've said a couple of times, each district is going to be slightly different. So when you reach out or you get this copy, you might have questions and you can reach back out to them or to the parents. They might be able to help you. Okay, we're going to cruise on through. We've got about 10 more minutes, so we're going to try and get everything here. Julie is going to share some pictures of her classroom next.
Okay. This first slide is just an example of our classroom schedule. It's actually our morning classroom, which is a little bit shorter, but I have a class schedule that we send out to the parents and we have posted in, and that's the one at the bottom that just shows the different things. And then the top one is a visual picture schedule that the kids can use, and we move the arrow down as we do. Those can be used very differently. You can use arrows or you can take off once the one activity has been completed to show what's left. But my typical day is the children usually arrive about 8:15 to 8:30 and we check in, they put backpacks in their cubbies, and the check-in we have on a smart board. And so the picture will show a little boy checking in on the smart board that you go up and do that. And then they come back and we do some name activities at the table while we're waiting for everybody to come in because not everybody comes at the same time. And so it just kind of keeps that a little bit easier and not quite as overwhelming for the kids. And then we move to a bathroom break. And then after bathroom breaks, we do movement and music and our morning meeting at the carpet, which is like circle time. And then we go outside for outside choice time or recess. On cold days, that would be indoor choice. And then every time we come in from outside, we wash our hands. And then we start our small group and our academic choice time. In my classroom, they're done at the same time. And so we have... within our classroom, we have the centers and the different things set up. And then we also have teacher tables. And so we pull children to the teacher table to do that teacher directed activity or small group. And then we'll send them back to the self-directed part where they can make their choice of what they are wanting to do that day, so whether it's in the housekeeping area or we might have the doctor dramatic play in that area. We have Dollhouse, we have the blocks and the building, and we have the science center and the Play-Doh and the sensory, and the reading and the books and the art center and the sensory. We always have sensory in our classroom as well for those kids. And so I've just found that doing it that way, we're kind of sandwiching it and trying to hit all of their interest areas to make it engaging for the skills for them. And then but with the visual, it just kind of goes back through our day on that. So you can turn the slide, Rose. Thank you.
Oh.
These are just pictures of my classroom and how it's kind of set up. And in early childhood, there are lots of different ways for you guys to set up the classroom. With it, it is one thing that I do look at. So if we are having a lot of behaviors, the first thing I'm going to look at is our environment and our schedule. Could that possibly be causing some of those behaviors? If you have a big racetrack in your classroom or an open area, sometimes that becomes a running area too. And so if you can change it up a bit so that that doesn't happen. But the first picture is our entry area. That's where they come in and they put their stuff in their cubbies. And then we do have, as you walk in, there's the art, and then you see one of the other small group tables and playground or Play-Doh table, some of the sensory stuff. And then the other one also shows the other part of the cubbies for the different classrooms. And just some different interest areas that we have with the reading as well. So, and then our block area, and we have our light table over there too for them to build. That is a very high interest area within the building, or has been. And then our sensory area and our housekeeping at the moment. And I changed that out for the interests of the year. So we have an apple orchard where we weigh apples and do different things, and we can buy things at the market. We have a doctor one. We just changed it out to keep it interesting for the kids to practice those skills. Puzzles, and then we have a science center, and then my circle time rug with our other one. And then the last part is there's our big circle time rug. That's where the kids sit to do our morning meeting. We also do our movement on that rug as well. And then a couple of the pictures of some of the visuals we use. On the left-hand side, that's a visual schedule. We have the schedule up on the board in my classroom, but for some of my kids, the individual schedules work best. And what happens is they're different pecs, and as they complete each one, they take it off. And we go down. With that too, it also they can take it with them. So if they're leaving the room to go to speech, or if they're leaving to go outside, we can take it with. There's a lineup as well that they can show, so it can be portable with them and they don't have to have it just in the classroom. The other one is some of those pictures I was talking about. So if we have a child who struggles with some of those transitions, it kind of shows them what we're wanting. So if they're being louder, I can show them the picture of the quiet. And sometimes that's all it takes. They see that visual and they know exactly what to do. Has just been very helpful in our classroom. And then the other is the first, next, then, or it could just be first, then with just two. And for some children, it's helpful to know what's coming up next, what I'm asking you to do first, and then what I'm going to get to do afterwards. And that also has been very helpful in the classroom. Sometimes the one on the left is way too overwhelming for them to see. And so knowing what they need to do just for those two choices has been helpful as all. But our classroom, our schedule, we run, it's pretty much a regular, it runs just like a regular early childhood preschool classroom. We have all of those same areas, and we use the therapies and different interventions within what they're doing during their play and their different activities during the day too. So.
Thank you, Julie. most of you attendees should be very familiar with a visual schedule. We've only got about 3 minutes left. So, collaboration. You guys have heard about all the people that it takes as Caleb and Julie went over the IEP. So I'm just going to kind of show you these next couple of slides. Julie and Caleb, I might ask you a couple of times to chime in, but I'm just going to cruise through so we can get through this. So these are all those people that we've identified that it takes a team to be a part of this process. Both Julie and Caleb mentioned an ROI, so that release of information, and that is that first step. And there's actually a question in the chat that here in a second I'm going to have Caleb and Julie kind of talk about. But the ROI is one of that most important steps that we have so that there can be that back and forth dialogue between the school district and the parents or even the early childhood teachers. The information that helps. So we talked about your guys' observations, the data, the progress, and the strengths. And then this continues with the work that Julie and Caleb do. And this helps them formulate if they are making progress within their goals and how do they reevaluate them. They're looking at their observations, their data, their progress, and the strengths of the child, right? Classroom supports. Julie just listed them all basically within her classroom, and hopefully you guys have all of these things. The only thing I want to bring up again is that interest led. That was something Julie had brought up when we first met, and just making sure that you know what your children are interested in, and that takes that first baseline relationship, right? Apologies if I'm speed talking, guys, trying to not keep you here any later than you have to be on a Monday night. This is a reiteration of some of the small changes you guys can make just while you're waiting, right? You don't have to have an IEP, a diagnosis. These are just things that you know can help. And I love Julie's examples and the painter stick idea. I think that's a great idea for that individual schedule. So I hope you guys can go back and do that because it's free, right? You guys can laminate and use that. All right, local resources. This is something I wanted to spend a little bit of time on. Um, this is the birth to 3 map. So you guys can see you guys are in region 1. If you want to snap a picture of this, or you can find it on their website, but those are your contact information there on the left-hand side. If you have a birth to 3 child in your care that you do want to make a referral or share this information with those families. Then we're looking at the local school districts. I tried to identify any of the schools within our 13 counties that ECC serves. I know I missed some, but these are for attendees. Here are your phone numbers that you're going to reach out to. Let you snap a picture if you want. Julie and Caleb mentioned the Child Find Belle Fourche has 4 set. Rapid City just announced their set. So again, if you live in Rapid and you want to take a picture of this, this is their Child Find screening schedule. And we are going to skip the myth busting because we are running out of time, and we're going to skip the example. So I apologize for that. We could have spent 3 hours talking on this subject. So these are your next steps. If you want to know more, the Department of Ed, Caleb and Julie both mentioned, as was Birth to 3. South Dakota Early Childhood Enrichment is ECC's parent agency. And then the Council for Exceptional Children is a professional organization that you can join. Last year they ran a promo free registration, so I would encourage you to look into that. Professional growth. Black Hills State University offers a bachelor's in early childhood education, or it's a double major, early childhood education and special education. So if you're interested in pursuing and maybe being an EI teacher like Julie, I'm sure Caleb would welcome you with open arms up in Belle Fourche. So if you have your CDA, it articulates into 11 credit hours at Black Hills State. So just something to think about. We're going to skip the pre-submitted questions. Caleb and Julie, if you want to navigate over to the chat and read that and maybe answer that really quick, either out loud, I think that that is something that maybe takes precedence over these 2 pre-submitted questions.
Yeah, so the first part of that question is asking about if the daycare teacher is going to be included in the initial IEP meeting. And so we have required team members that have to be present at our meetings. That daycare or preschool teachers is not one of them. However, parents are free to invite whoever they want. So they could invite an outside therapist or mental health counselor or a preschool teacher if they like, but it's not somebody that we reach out to and initiate their participation. And then the second part of that is about initiating the release of information or requesting a copy of the IEP. I think that kind of goes back to a few things we talked about as far as having like trust and positive relationship. And if they seem like hesitant to share that information, maybe just start with, are there supports I need to be aware of that will help me better serve them, and kind of go from there, making sure that they know why you want that information, and it's to better serve their child. And usually they're going to be pretty open to sharing whatever information they need to facilitate that. And then another part too is parents don't need to sign a release of information if they just want to give you a document from the school. You have to have the information release signed for us to share it with you. But parents can give it to you guys or to whomever they feel fit. It's just that we aren't able to do it.
Thank you, Caleb. Julie, did you have anything to add on to that question? No?
No, I guess the only other thing too is if you have like when a child starts, if you have a questionnaire you give to families, that might be a place to ask if they are receiving other supports too. So
perfect. That's what I was going to add on. So thank you for doing that. So apologies that the last couple sections were a little rushed. I really wanted to spend a lot of time on that IEP because that seems to be continued when you guys do get access to it. Like, what do I do with it now? I have all this information, and hopefully tonight those experts talking you through what all of those goals and acronyms mean. And then now you can take that back into what are some of the things that I can tangibly do. So if that goal was that that child is going to transition with only of those two redirections, right, within the early childhood, early intervention classroom, maybe within the preschool classroom or the daycare, you can help practice transitions and give them transition warnings or use that first then board like Julie had. So you can be helping support the work that they do within the school district or birth to 3 with some of those tools and resources just by being aware and reading that information. So it'll help make that collaboration and that growth for that child just that much stronger. So thank you guys for hopping on tonight. I really appreciate your guys' investment in early childhood and specifically the early intervention process and hopefully demystifying it, like pulling back the curtain and getting to see that process tonight was enlightening for you guys. I'm a huge Temple Grandin fan, so that's why she's up here. As you guys return back to your classrooms and programs, just remember that, build that relationship first and concentrate on the strengths of the child, and then remember and talk to the parents that a referral isn't a failure, right? This is not a prediction. Like Caleb said, sometimes those children they're gonna test out of those goals or even services. So this is in addition to helping them be successful. So go back and hopefully take that, and you guys are doing amazing work. And remember, those first 5 years are the most important years of a child's life. So I appreciate you. I'm not going to navigate over to future trainings. Here is the evaluation QR code. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. And while I do that, I will let Julie and Caleb say some closing remarks.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit, and I hope that some of the information we provided will help you guys help some kids. Thanks for the time.
yes, thank you all very much. You guys are so important in this whole process as well, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caleb and Julie, for agreeing and taking all the time to share your guys' knowledge and experience. So it's very beneficial to get to talk to other people outside of our field that can bring in that knowledge. So thank you guys. While you guys are taking the evaluation, I'm going to play a trailer for the Temple Grandin movie so that it's not just awkward silence while you guys do that. And once you fill out the evaluation, you guys are free to go. Quick reminder, next month, our next evening with the experts is the importance of prenatal and infant high quality practices. And that is with Anna Dykstra. She is a certified nurse midwife, actually in Spearfish. And she's going to be speaking with Ashley Young here at ECC. So really pouring into what do we do for those expectant moms who come and tour our facilities, and then those brand new little babies when they're in our care. What are some high practice procedures, policies that we can help them in their youngest, most critical years. And then one other thing, our fall conference, we have Dr. Anna Quinn from Spearfish again, who is speaking all day October 3rd here at Rapid City Black Hills State University about trauma-informed care. And she's going to be our keynote, and then we're going to have some breakouts that she'll be a breakout along with Children's Home Society. And this is eligible for continuing education hours, along with if we have, I don't think tonight we do, but any licensed counselors, it will also be eligible for continuing their certification as well. If you have any questions about that, please don't hesitate to ask. Again, when you're done with the evaluation, you guys are free to go, and I hope I see you guys all again soon. Thank you, guys.
My name is Temple Grandin. I'm not like other people.
She's an amazing visual thinker.
Are you a scientist?
I used to work for NASA. Can you bring everything you've seen to your mind?
Sure.
Wow.
Can't you?
Excellent work, Temple. Really excellent work.
How'd you figure that out? He can see all around without moving his head.
How is she?
She's good.
You do remember, though, something's gonna set her off.
When was she diagnosed?
She was 4. Temple! I have done everything that I can for Temple.
We know how different she is.
Different, not less.
You have a very special mind, you know that? Think of it as a door. A door that's going to open up onto a whole new world for you. Pick a subject.
Cows? Do they have colleges with cows?
Yes, they do.
Why are some mowing more loudly than others? There must be a reason they're saying something.
Well, I reckon you could get Dr. Doolittle on out here. He probably could tell you.
Mooing. You want to do research and write your master's on mooing.
I can see a shoot just as a cattle will because that's something autism lets me do.
You wacko.
I know my system will work because I've been through it 1,000 times in my head. My husband read about you.
Miss Grandin, this is a masterpiece.
I don't want my thoughts to die with me. I want to have done something.
It's nothing short of a miracle.